Just a quick update. A lot has happened since this video was originally filmed in the middle of the year 2020. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won the presidential election of 2020 and have defeated Donald Trump. But we hope that you'll still find this video to be of value in explaining the astrological aspects that brought about the great pandemic of 2020. And so now, here is the video filmed in the middle of 2020, in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. Roll it. It could quite possibly be the story of our times. It is the coronavirus. It is the COVID-19 pandemic that has started this year in 2020. And no one yet knows for certain when exactly this pandemic will end. If a vaccine becomes widely available, would the people of the world trust it? Many more hurdles will remain to be faced. Would you be surprised if we told you that we could trace back the origins of this pandemic to some of the happenings of the past? What if we could specifically relate this pandemic to the East Coast versus West Coast rivalries that existed in the 1990s? Would you be surprised? Watch this video and find out. Today, we're going to look at this pandemic and try to understand what role astrology might have played in bringing the world to this point. And let's see if astrology can help us to navigate where we're going.
The stars were here many years before us, and they'll be here many years after we're gone. We study the stars so that you can be free to uncover mysteries and unlock your destiny.
Hello, and welcome to Masters of the Zodiac, where we explore astrology, uncover mysteries, and ultimately seek to help you unlock your destiny. Today, we're going to look at what astrology can tell us about COVID-19, the coronavirus pandemic of 2020. Throughout history and in times of crisis, many people turn to their faith or their religion for answers. People want to understand or at least have a reason for whatever brought about the great calamities that they're facing and experiencing. But first, let's check and see how leading astrologers here in the USA handled predicting or forecasting the pandemic of 2020. Here at Masters of the Zodiac, we track 3 well-known astrologers who at least provide a monthly horoscope to their followers. Those astrologers are Susan Miller of astrologyzone.com, Channing Nicholas of channingnicholas.com, and Mecca Woods of bustle.com. These 3 ladies may be considered as Masters of the Zodiac, and we'll look to their forecast for answers as to whether astrology is real or fake. Each of these astrologers provided either a full 2020 outlook or a monthly forecast. So let's just see how accurate they were about the beginnings of the current crisis that has affected us here in the United States and around the world. If there are other astrologers who you'd recommend for consideration in our panel of masters, please let us know in the comments below or visit us at mzods.com to submit your suggestions. The only rule is that the astrologer must at least provide a monthly forecast. In the case of the coronavirus pandemic of 2020, let's see how accurate their forecasts were for the onset of the pandemic here in the United States in March of 2020. In Mecca's annual 2020 forecast, she said, if 2020 could be summarized, this would be the year that we are called to tear down things in our lives that are no longer working, while redefining what's truly important to us. She said, we can expect to be quite busy this year, laying down new foundations for our lives in 2020 and the years to come. That sounds pretty fair. She was right to say that our way of life will be torn down, and if you look around and ask a lot of the world's citizens how they're doing, they'd agree that 2020 has been a year to remember. As for new foundations, we've still got to finish this year, if we're blessed and lucky. Okay, now let's take a look at Channy's horoscope for 2020. Channy says, 2020 is full of age-defining astrology. In the last 200 years, we've witnessed an unprecedented amount of human consumption of the Earth's resources. Thanks to the institutionalization of white supremacist, patriarchal, colonialist capitalism that set the stage for this age, excessive waste has been celebrated up until now. Coming together in Aquarius at the end of 2020, Jupiter and Saturn begin a new cycle in a new element. This is a once in a 200-year opportunity to make necessary adjustments needed to begin the long process of shifting course. Okay, so I don't know if Channing knew it or not, but can there be any doubt that the world has truly shifted course? Even in the outset of the pandemic, the air in different parts of the world hasn't been this clear since the beginnings of the industrial age. In different parts of the world, people are now able to see mountaintops way off in the distance, mountaintops which were once obscured by heavy pollution. Lastly, let's take a look at what Susan Miller had to say in March 2020 as the pandemic unfolded in the continental United States. Susan shared this horoscope for Scorpios. I'll take this as personal privilege. This March 9th full moon is one of the most encouraging full moons of the year and will lift you out of ordinary life to experience something otherworldly and quite beautiful. It appears the event will be a distance from your base and you will need to travel there. It will be well worth the effort. Neptune will conjunct the sun, so no matter if the event is social or professional, it seems it will be quite beautiful with no expense spared. It will certainly be an event not to miss. Okay, please bear in mind that it was mid-March that the virus was really getting off to the races here in the United States. I'd considered traveling to LA in late February, but I'm very glad that I didn't, knowing everything we know right now. And I'm sorry, Susan, but that forecast would have been a risky bet for a Scorpio like myself here in the USA, so just saying. That's just a sample of what the masters had to say in the lead up to the pandemic. If you know of another insightful astrologer or app that was prescient in the onset of this crisis, please feel free to share in the comments or take it over to mzots.com for more thorough analysis. So now, let's focus on the heart of this video. Let's step back for a moment and take a look at another timeline of events. Even before we start thinking about 2020, let's go back to the 1990s when there lived two great rappers, an East Coast artist on the Bad Boys label, the notorious B.I.G., Biggie Smalls, and a West Coast artist on the label of Death Row, Tupac Shakur. To this day, both rappers are highly regarded as key figures in the history of rap. In fact, the two rappers at one point were close and rather saw themselves as friends. But as time progressed, there would be a falling out between the two. There would be accusations by Tupac of inappropriate relations with Biggie Smalls' wife, Faith Evans. But perhaps more than anything, their personal divergence and split represented the beginning of a deadly rivalry between the East Coast and West Coast, a conflict that ultimately resulted in unnecessary bloodshed and deaths between these two groups. It was a bad place and time when the two of the greatest rappers to ever live would be taken from us in flashes of gunfire. Both rappers died in the midst of a conflict between East and West, or should we say the East Coast versus the West Coast of the United States. But what if I told you that Biggie Smalls and Tupac Shakur shared something in common beyond being rappers? What if I told you that both of these rappers were born under the sun sign of Gemini? Surprise, surprise. Yes, they were both born Geminis, and both had enough mouth on each of them to prove it many times over and over again. They were both born under the sign of the curious communicator, and their lives exuded that title every moment that they lived. The only difference between the two was that Biggie was born on May 27th on the cusp of Taurus, while Tupac was born on June 16th on the cusp of Cancer. What do you think about that? So today we find ourselves in a situation where another set of Geminis are feuding, except this time the stakes couldn't be higher. It's one thing when you have an internecine conflict between groups on the eastern coast and the western coast of a single country. It's quite another thing when such a conflict exists at levels of nations and run the risk of embroiling the entire planet in conflicts. And that's precisely where the world is today, with China and the United States. Once again, it's East versus West, but this time posing one of the greatest risks to humanity itself. Early on in 2020, the American president thought the pandemic was under control in China. He and the Chinese premier Xi Jinping had communicated with each other and said that the threat of the virus had been minimized on both continents. The virus was supposed to have minimal impact in the continental United States. Maybe up to 15 people would get infected, so said the president. Well, as we stand here today, more than 300,000 Americans have died due to the coronavirus. Nowadays, Donald Trump likes to place the blame on China for not containing the disease when Trump was actually the one who dismantled the White House office that proactively handles these types of international crises and pandemics. Trump shut down the one office whose primary job would have been to isolate this disease and keep it from reaching American shores. So in that case, Trump is fully responsible for the circumstances which we find ourselves in right now. And because Trump was unable to accept responsibility for his negligence and careless attitude, the situation has been gravely aggravated across the country. While other nations were able to slow the spread of the virus and reopen, America's vacillating policies and state-by-state or city-by-city mandates have allowed the coronavirus to get out of hand. So what does the Gemini sign have to do with the predicament that we find ourselves in right now? As we've already shared, Biggie Smalls and Tupac Shakur were both Geminis. But would it surprise you to learn that Donald Trump is also a Gemini? Yes, Donald Trump was born on June 14th in the core of Gemini, but that's not all. Can you guess who else is also a Gemini in this high-stakes game of East versus West? If you guessed, that the Chinese premier Xi Jinping was also a Gemini, you would be absolutely correct. Xi Jinping was born on June 16th, 2 days after Donald Trump. He was born a Gemini on the cusp of Cancer. And so, once again, we have a case where two Geminis who were once seen as rather friendly at the beginning of the pandemic, at the beginning of their crisis, they're now looking at each other as the cause of each other's nation's greatest ills. Trump would have it seem as if China deserves the full blame for the pandemic spreading here. Xi Jinping looks at the United States as being incompetently irresponsible for not taking the virus seriously and allowing the global economy to falter in ways not seen since the Great Depression. This pandemic is ongoing and can go in any number of directions before everything is said and done. But we must respect the fact that as the crisis began, it largely is the fault of these two Geminis in the same way that the East Coast-West Coast rivalries of the 1990s were largely spurred on by the back and forth between Biggie Smalls and Tupac Shakur. Is history repeating itself? Well, one thing that the two current Geminis should be conscientious about is that these types of rivalries did not end well for their instigators back in the 90s, as both found themselves as victims on the wrong side of a gun's barrel. The outcome was not a nice one for Biggie Smalls or Tupac Shakur. So we must closely monitor the back and forth between these Gemini players on the world stage. Would you be surprised to learn that Trump and Xi Jinping are not the only Geminis participating in this crisis at the highest levels of leadership? No, they are not alone. Would you be surprised to learn that Mike Pence, Trump's vice president, is also born under Gemini? Like his boss, Mike Pence was also born in the core of Gemini, but his birthday falls on June 7th. Depending on your politics, it may be a good thing that Geminis are both in the presidency and vice presidency simultaneously. For others, it may be seen as a curse, where our leadership is out of whack and out of balance. In the same way that the US Constitution would prevent a presidential ticket from consisting of two people from the same state, perhaps the same type of law should apply to two persons of the same zodiac sign. The executive branch needs some balance. Clearly, the current occupants are wholly unyoked. But Mike Pence is not the only other Gemini. Would you be surprised to learn that across the Atlantic, and someone who was also a pandemic denier, calling it a hoax and a simple flu, was none other than the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Boris Johnson. Yes, Boris Johnson is also a Gemini, born on June 19th, on the cusp of Cancer. And very much like the people of the United States, we have seen the British people suffer from having leaders with too much mouth and not enough focus on the issue at hand, confronting these crises appropriately. You see, one thing that Gemini may fail to realize is that you can't out-talk or bully a virus. The virus doesn't care about your word choices or your gift of gab. If the curious communicator is not communicating about the right things, then the curious communicator will put everyone in peril and jeopardy. So let's see, Trump is a Gemini, Xi Jinping is a Gemini, Boris Johnson is a Gemini. That begs the question, is it possible that Vladimir Putin is a Gemini too? Could that be what our global situation is? Fortunately, the answer to that question is no. Fortunately, for Putin and for the world, Vladimir is not a Gemini, but he is a Libra born on October 7th in the core of Libra. One thing to note is that Libra and Gemini are both air signs, and by being of the same element, the influences on each other are clear. For many, it's very clear to see that the charming tastemaker that is Libra, that is Vladimir Putin, has had an influence on the curious communicator that is Gemini, that is Donald Trump. Of all the people in the world that Trump has dared to cross or insult, Trump has never said one bad word about Vladimir Putin, and many believe that there are reasons beyond astrology for why that is the case. So Vladimir is a Libra, and now we know where all the major players on the international stage are astrologically set. One thing to note about our present times is that by observing the history of pandemics and plagues, we can look back at those times as great periods of upheaval. When the Spanish flu raged around the world more than a century ago, it was a time of great revolution in Russia. In some respects, people might say that the United States is also in a similar situation where we may be in the midst of a second revolution ourselves. Time will tell. But one thing that you may find interesting is that astrology has been applied to whole countries based on a country's date of birth. Now you may ask, how is it possible for a country and an inanimate object to have a birth date? How is it possible for an intangible idea that is only defined in the minds of humans to have a birth date? Well, the answer is simple. The answer is that the day a country is founded or liberated is what astrologers will typically consider as that country's birth date. So surprisingly enough, astrologers would say that the United States was born on July 4th, 1776, and thus the USA was born in the core of Cancer. Likewise, China's birthday would be the date that the People's Republic of China was established on October 1st, 1949. This means that China would have been born in the core of Libra. So as we already discussed, Gemini would have an affinity with Libra by them both being air signs. A Gemini leader such as Jinping would have a natural affinity with a Libra country such as China. However, a Gemini leader would not necessarily have a natural affinity with a Cancerian country. In spite of being elected, we see that the country, the USA, may have figured out just how much trouble it's in from doubling down on Gemini leaders with a Gemini president and a Gemini vice president. In fact, the last Gemini president that America had was assassinated. That president was John F. Kennedy, born on May 29th in the core of Gemini, just like Trump. When JFK was assassinated, it was in the midst of great racial strife in the 1960s. There are many conspiracy theories behind what happened to JFK in 1963. But for now, let's just know that he was a Gemini. And it begs the question, during other revolutionary periods in human history, did other Geminis play a role? If you've ever seen footage of Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, you may have noticed that some of the rooms are finely appointed with what looks like ornate French designs and gold moldings. If you were a student of history, those gold moldings and those French designs might remind you of the setting of a period piece in France at the time of the French Revolution. Your mind might immediately think of the monarch king Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette, who once said, "Let them eat cake," when the majority of their subjects, a majority of the impoverished French people, were not even able to afford bread. Was Louis XVI a Gemini? The answer is no. He was not a Gemini. We find that Louis XVI was born on August 23rd in 1775, which would have made him a Virgo, born on the cusp of Leo, just missing Leo by a day. However, Louis's coronation as king did occur on June 11th, 1775, a date which is in the core of Gemini. So with this knowledge, if we cross-reference Louis's birthday against our most recent happenings, we would find that Louis XVI shares his birthday with Kobe Bryant, who was born 203 years later in 1978. I'm sorry, but the tragic story of Kobe Bryant will have to be another topic for Zodiac analysis that we'll need to save for another day. In the end, we know that during these revolutionary periods where coups occur and monarchs are overthrown, we know that the outcome isn't nice for these leaders, as was the case with the French monarchy. The outcome was not nice for Louis XVI or his wife. In Russia, there was also a similar revolution. In fact, their revolution occurred at the same time that the Spanish flu was ravaging the world in 1918. In 1918, the Russian Tsar Nicholas Romanov met a similar fate, with he and his family being shot, thrown down a well, and acid poured over their bodies to destroy their remains. As for parallels to today, this is what we know. Was Nicholas a Gemini? No, he was not. However, Nicholas was born on May 18th, a Taurus, who was born on the cusp of Gemini. Nicholas was just 3 days away from being a Gemini. So we say all of this to say that in a season of pandemics and plagues, racial strife and revolution, we should evaluate whether astrology has any true insights from which we all could benefit. So at a very high level, we have completed a thorough zodiac analysis of the key players in historical events to shed light on how astrology could help guide us through the current coronavirus pandemic. Yes, we could put all of our eggs in one basket, that a vaccine will become available and our situation will be resolved. But we must be ever vigilant that our decisions are ultimately taking us down the right road. A deeper, more intense global conflict between East and West could be averted with a change in leadership in the USA. The current nominee to replace Donald Trump is Joe Biden, who was born on November 20th, a Scorpio on the cusp of Sagittarius. That would bode well for a country born in Cancer on July the 4th, since both Cancers and Scorpios are water signs and thus would have a natural affinity for each other. Also, it should be noted that one of the last great Scorpio presidents of the USA was Theodore Roosevelt, born on October 27th, a Scorpio on the cusp of Libra. Teddy, as he was called, did a lot to preserve the natural beauty of this country by enacting laws that created natural parks that Americans and visitors in America can enjoy as long as the Republic stands. Joe Biden also selected Kamala Harris, who's a very savvy Libra, born on October 20th. And so we see that the country would be done with the double Gemini president-vice president business, which would definitely be a healthy change, if I say so myself. Hope that you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't done so already, please share, comment, like, and subscribe to this channel. We want to invite you to continue your odyssey of understanding and mastering the Zodiac. If you haven't done so already, take a deeper dive into understanding your own Zodiac intensity by checking out any of the 12 videos that we have available based on your Zodiac sign. Don't miss out. And as always, We want to encourage you to visit our website at mzods.com for free reports that are specifically tailored to you and designed to meet your needs. Just sign up at mzods.com to receive your free report today. And by signing up, you'll also be eligible for special contests, prizes, and giveaways that may occur from time to time. So don't miss out. Stop waiting. Start doing. At Masters of the Zodiac, we track the best of the best astrologers and apps that are available. If you've had a great experience with an astrologer or an astrology app, let us know. If you've had a bad or horrible experience, let us know. Drop comments here or on YouTube, or drop them at mzods.com, where you'll find a treasure trove of insights and reviews about the best astrologers and astrology apps on the market. And also, don't forget to show your Zodiac pride. You'll find some of the best gear to let the world know exactly who you are based on your Zodiac sign. Yes, visit our online store at mzods.com for the best Zodiac swag on the internet, and check back periodically for the latest updates. So until next time, please stay safe and have an excellent journey on this adventure that we call life. Until next time, I'm Brian LeVar, and this is Masters of the Zodiac.
Follow Brian on Instagram and Twitter at BRYLAVAR.